Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for having me. It is a pleasure. This is one of our first webinars that we have run. So this is an exciting new adventure for me. I, as Jody mentioned, I'm the interim director of the Ombuds Office, and we are simply put a confidential resource to help members of our community strategically work through conflict in a in a way that they choose and that isn't in a formal setting, but one where we just present options and then you can move forward. So what this is today is really an overview of the kinds of options that we look at, especially with supervisors, managers, leaders, and how they can be effective leaders and how they can run a successful team. So at the end of this 20 minutes, you will be equipped with everything you need to have an absolutely successful team. Maybe not, but we have an overview of a bunch of things I'm going to throw at you, and some may be really relevant, some may not make as much sense for your team, so really just an overview. Today, this workshop, this presentation is based on this book. It is Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Specifically, he wrote a follow-up called Overcoming the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And what he found, he's a consultant, he's worked with companies across the globe. What he found was that these 5 things could either make or break a team's success. And these were the dysfunctions that he talks about in the first book. First is the absence of trust. Next is the fear of conflict. Next is the lack of commitment. Next is avoidance of accountability, and finally, inattention to results. And you'll notice that they're in a pyramid structure because they feed on one another. They build upon one another, and without the previous one, the next one is not necessarily going to be as successful. So I took that and flipped it a little bit. And if we say, okay, these are the 5 dysfunctions, what are the 5 functions? And if you look, you can see trust is at the foundation. Then we have conflict, then commitment, then accountability, and then results. So what does this mean? Trust is the foundational piece. Without trust, you're going to have a hard time getting to any of these next steps. And I'm going to go into, after this, into detail specifically about each one and give you tools to increase each one. Right now, I'm just going to give you an overview of what I mean when I say these things. So trust is the ability of your team to be open to mistakes, to each other's failures, to say, I'm sorry. It's that shared connection and that safety to show who you are and all of your goodness and potentially your faults too, and have it be a safe environment to do that. Without fear of judgment, without fear of retribution, knowing that people want the best for each other and assume the best for each other because they care about the good of the team. So if that exists, then we can move to conflict. Are any of you surprised that conflict is one of the 5 functions of a team? We have to share that in our office. We deal in conflict. This is what I see every day. And if you word associate with conflict, I'm not sure functional team would be a association that you would put with conflict. But we'll go into why it is a little bit more in a minute. But conflict, what we're talking about here, is not the destroyer of teams, which you often see, but functionally managed conflict is what brings out the good ideas that people have. It is the freedom to express disagreement, to express ideas, to express opinions in a safe way so that the best outcome can be reached. It's when people are afraid of speaking up, afraid of sharing their view, that we can't get the best results because you need your team's input. Their different functionalities, their different viewpoints, their different insight in order to get there. So that's what we mean by conflict. So if it's a safe environment to have conflict, then you are able to come to the table, get out all kinds of ideas, have heated but safe discussions, and know that all the ideas are out there and move forward in a way that everyone agrees to. So that's where the commitment piece comes in. There's a buy-in when people feel like they've been heard, when their opinion is valued, and everything has been out on the table. So now we have commitment. When the team commits together to a shared goal, there's a collective responsibility that comes with that. And you'll find that they'll begin to hold each other accountable, not in a nitpicky, you did this, you didn't do that, you could have done this better, but in an inspiring way that drives the team to what the final cap on this pyramid results. So if you've made it up to the pyramid, if there's trust, if there's an ability to effectively engage in conflict, if there's commitment and accountability, that's when you'll be able to see results and move toward your goals. So now I'm going to go one by one through these and give you just a few strategies, a few resources on how you can build each block here in this pyramid with your team. I'll spend a lot of time on trust and conflict because these are so foundational, and this is what we work the most with people on in our office. And we'll touch on the other three, but I want to spend the bulk of the time with trust and conflict because they're so foundational. So before we move to trust, I want to highlight something that Patrick Lencioni, highlights in his book, where he says the things that you need as a leader to bring a successful team about, there are these skills that you need here and there, but the most valuable things that you can bring as a leader are courage and persistence. And those will come up throughout what we're talking about, but I want to make sure to bring up those words that building a successful team is about courage and persistence. And we'll get there. So first, we're looking at trust. Sometimes it's helpful to look at what trust is by looking at its opposite. So in low trust environments, what does that look like? People conceal their weaknesses and mistakes. People hesitate to ask for help or provide constructive feedback. They jump to conclusions about the intentions and aptitudes of others. They fail to recognize and tap into each other's skills and experiences. They waste time on putting on a show for others to promote themselves rather than the team. They hold grudges. They find reasons to avoid spending time together. If I were to take a poll of all of you, how many of you this looks familiar? Maybe you have seen that on a team you have been on. When this is the environment that workers are living in, there's just no way that you can move up that pyramid to effective results. There's a wall there, and this is why I have that image. There's slowly you're building a barrier between members of the team so that you can't harness the effective power of everyone. So how do we build trust? I really like this image as well. It's a woman walking out on a tightrope across a valley, and this is what it looks like to trust a team, potentially to be able to put yourself out there and know that you are going to do the best you can, and if for some reason there's a slip, the team has your back, and they will work with you to succeed. So as we look at what building trust looks like, that starts with you as a leader. How trustworthy are you? What are you modeling to your team? that shows them that trust is important, that you are trustworthy, and that you expect them to be as well. How do you build trust? One fun tool that we like to use is the trust equation. This is from Charles Green. There's a link at the bottom of this slide if you're going to see the slides later to learn more about it. But here's the trustworthiness equation. That trustworthiness equals credibility plus reliability plus intimacy over self-orientation. So credibility is the idea that you know what you need to know, that you are skilled in the work that you're doing. Reliability is that you do what you say you're going to do, that you follow up, you follow through. Intimacy is the idea that you connect with your team on an individual, on a human level. Intimacy is how your team feels when they're with you. Are they comfortable? Are they free to share? Do they know that you care about them and they're good? And all of this, so you're adding, I'm not good at math, this is why I went into conflict management. But all of these added up, you then divide that by how self-focused you are versus how other-focused you are. The more self-focused you are, it's going to undermine any kind of work that you have done in that top portion. The more other-focused you are, the more that other people realize that, hey, you're working for them and they're good and the benefit of the team over just your own selfish desires, the more trustworthy you will be. And another thing to point out here is that credibility is often what gets us into a role, that we really know how to do what we do. But that's actually the least valuable when it comes to trustworthiness. It's important and it needs to be there, but reliability and intimacy are those two pieces that are actually the more important pieces that need to be there as you're building trust. Another exercise you can do with your team is a personal sharing exercise. So if you want to step out a little bit and get your team to move toward trust, here's one way to do it. To get them all in a room and have a sharing session. And ask questions like this. Where did you grow up? How many kids were in your family? What was the most important challenge of your childhood? What was your first job? What was your worst job? What was your most influential leader in your life? And what this does is it humanizes team members in a way that helps them work together and allow space for success and flaws, because we remember that we are equally human. So if you knew that, I grew up across the globe, I grew up in Hong Kong and I moved around a lot. I'm one of 6 kids, and one of the most important challenges of my childhood was learning how to adapt and navigate these new environments. Now you know something about me in a way that you may not have before, and that can provide insight into why I am who I am, why I do what I do, and that can help your team bond on a more human level. And then finally, self-assessments. Doing those as a team can be really helpful. So if you've done anything like the Myers-Briggs or the Colors assessment or DISC or people skills, what this does is it normalizes difference. And it says you can be like this or you can be like this, and these come with good and bad pieces. So for example, in DISC and people skills, they map people on these 4 quadrants: more task-oriented, more people-oriented, more process or expedience-oriented. And you all know people who are I need this yesterday, get it to me now. And then you know the people who are like, I just want to sit down and I want to learn about you and I want to learn about your weekend and let's talk about it and let's have a long time to understand context. And what we see is sometimes these clashing in the workplace, but you need all of these on a team. So what a self-assessment does is it can map out your team and make these differences something that's positive rather than negative. So now if we move into mastering conflict, I like this image again, very image focused, as you can tell, this fire image, that conflict can either be absolutely destructive, and cause a lot of pain, just like fire. Or it can be a force for change and growth and good when its power is harnessed. So how do you master conflict? Another way to do that, again, if we're on that self-assessment mode, is to use a conflict self-assessment. One of those is called the Thomas Kilmann conflict self-assessment, and it charts people on assertiveness versus cooperativeness. So as we think about conflict in the workplace, we have these conflict styles that we bring that come from how we grew up and the culture that we're from. So how many of you in your home, conflict was out there? You were direct, better out than in. Maybe it got loud, but that's okay because you need to share what's going on, and that's how we deal with conflict. Some of you maybe. And then how many of you on the other side, conflict was felt, but definitely not talked about in your home? So what happens when these two people come together in the workplace? Maybe they end up in our office, but this can be confusing because they have different ways of dealing with conflict. So doing a self-assessment on how we deal with conflict, are we more assertive? Are we more cooperative? And how can we harness those, the good that comes with all of those to create an effective team is an important step. So here's what that looks like. I won't get into the details exactly, but that's an overview of the Thomas Kilmann. And then finally, with mastering conflict, normalizing conflict or making conflict safe is really important. So one resource we have for that is the 6 Thinking Hats. It's a book by Edward de Bono. And it's the idea that when you're in a group and there's an important decision that needs to be made, you want to encourage the safe conflict. But in order to make it safe, you want to be clear about expectations. So he talks about these 6 hats. They're different colors, but the first hat is facts. Okay, let's get all the facts out on the table. All right, now we're going to put the next hat on. We're only going to talk about where each of these ideas brings positive value to the group. Okay, now we're going to put on the next hat. We're going to tear these ideas apart. We're going to play devil's advocate. Where are the holes? Then we're going to talk about how we feel about them. What are the hunches that you have? What are your intuition? Why do you feel that way? Is this going to work? Is it not? The next one is your creativity hat. What other ideas do we have? Has this sparked new creative thought? And then the final hat is someone overseeing the process, making sure everyone is heard. So what this does is it sets very clear expectations so that if someone is naturally very assertive, maybe they'll have to take a step back for a minute. And if someone is naturally kind of avoidant, they'll have to step in, and it's a safe way to do that. And then finally, you want to reward appropriate conflict. So when you see things done well, if someone comes to you and says, hey, I'm having a problem with something that you're doing, and it's done in a positive way, say thank you so much. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I really appreciate that you were brave enough to bring that up. And so what the behaviors that you reward are going to be the behaviors that continue. So as we move up trust and conflict, you can see that these things are really important to achieve a cohesive bond. So when we're looking at now commitment, you want to make sure that everyone feels buy-in and clarity. So as you're going through these processes of safe conflict, you want to make sure you're listening, acknowledging, and it's not about, we have seen that it's not necessarily, people are less concerned that their idea is the one that's pushed through. They're more concerned with how they were heard. Did they feel heard? Did they feel valued? So as you're making decisions as a leader, make sure to inform your team why you chose what you did, why you didn't choose what you didn't choose, and how your team fits into that. And then finally, at the end of meetings, what exactly have you decided? Maybe make that a regular thing at the end of meetings. Who's going to do what by when? That clarity is what's going to allow your team to commit and move forward. I'm just going to fly through these last 2 slides. As you, again, move up that pyramid, now you're at a point where the team can hold each other accountable because they trust each other, they're able to express themselves, and they share a common vision. So willingness of your team members to remind one another will come when those other blocks are achieved. So you want to model that. When someone does something right, wow, reward that. When someone is off track a little bit, make sure that that is addressed in a really timely manner so that people understand that there is accountability and that the team can then step up and hold each other accountable. And then finally, once you get past those, you can get to results. How many of you actually have very present goals and objectives that you can see around your office? If not, we encourage you to do that. Studies have shown that if you write down your goals and if you see them regularly, you're more likely to achieve them. So one, make sure that you have very clear goals and objectives, and two, put them around. So you want to clarify and prioritize your goals. One way to do that is through objectives and key results. This is a strategy employed by Google and a lot of the tech firms. Simple sentence, I will X as measured by Y. I will delight our customers as measured by their positive feedback on feedback quizzes. So you want to make sure that measurement piece is there and that you're tracking measurement out for the team to see, to motivate them and put them around. So those are, again, just a few tools, strategies, how to kind of fly through them that you can use with your teams. And we can be a resource here at the Ombuds office for you as you go on this journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. And we have time for questions if people would like to post them for Dana in the chat box. And Dana, you could let me know if you would like me to read them off to you or you would like to just refer to them yourself.
Sure, I can actually see them, so I'm not.
Excellent. So please feel free to ask Dana questions, and I can unmute people too if you'd like to talk. So, but you'd have to let us know in the chat box. And also remember that we have a survey, and your survey feedback really does help us. So it only has 3 questions in it. And so here's the survey link. Any questions for Dana? Okay, so let's see. Okay, let's see. Okay, there we go. We're getting some feedback.
So I see one, wish we had longer to cover this info. Me too. One resource that's available potentially is we do trainings for teams and can come into groups and do longer trainings. We also do trainings through training and development with UC Davis. And yeah, again, if you want to know more, this book, it's a really simple, quick read and very, very practical guide to everything that I mentioned.